How's it going, everybody? Another UGP showcase community call with the Meta-Delegate. We have here David Felton, who is representing Penguin Party. So really stoked to get this call on the way. I know David shares the same sentiment as I do, as well as the rest of the community. So with that being said, David, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and explain what Penguin Party is for all those non-Penguiners.
Yeah, so I'm David. I'm the founder of Penguin Party, which came about quite accidentally. And I've tried a couple of different startup ideas throughout my life, and this is, I guess, the first one that really stuck with people. So I run Penguin Party at the moment as we're kind of transitioning more into a DAO. Basically, it's a community of self-interested people that all got together to make public goods. We really encourage the community to jump up, participate with us. It's really similar to like a political party. So it kind of was birthed out of Uniswap. And when the governance started, I ran as a protocol politician. I accrued a bunch of votes myself. And then I decided that it was one thing for everybody to trust me to just go along with what they wanted me to vote. It's quite a different thing when it's more of a party and people can like really directly just signal on snapshot.page or similar tech to tell me how they want me to vote. And it kind of evolved into this meta governance ideal.
Sure. So I guess that's like a high overview of what Penguin Party is in a sense, right? It's kind of like I don't want to say a cohort, but it's like a branch of Uniswap governance to an extent, right? And there you go, you got a presentation. So we're going to dive into it just a bit. So again, my apologies, the floor is yours.
Oh, no worries. I mean, you could definitely keep up. I was just trying to be ready. Yeah, that's a pretty high level overview of like what it is at its heart. I'm going to kind of highlight, I think here at the beginning, like really my aspiration, right? Kind of more of like what I'm dreaming about. And it kind of goes along with what a lot of the top people in the world are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And so I'm a believer that that's blockchain. Blockchain is a industrial revolution that's happening, and it affects every industry, right? So as the 21st century comes into full swing, we have the internet, Ethereum, Starlink, space colonization, private space exploration, and other emergent technologies that are taking hold. And a new industrial revolution is coming into focus, which requires a new political philosophy to take shape, one centered on transparency, openness, composability, and open source software. One centered on the abundance of resources that will be available to mankind in its final industrialized phase of society, from private space exploration, global cooperation, and the imminent realization that we have to take better care of the earth, right? And so I'm thinking of this thing that's really being signaled to us from the United Nations, kind of partially by coronavirus, right? That we are at a fundamental cross in the road, right? A fork in the road where we have two different directions we can go down, and really the only one that makes sense is for us to all work together to explore space, right? That's basically what has to happen. We have to take better care of the planet. And so I have this idea of a political philosophy, basically, that kind of goes along with that. And it's based on open source software. And that's kind of what Penguin Party is meant to embody. Something that more equitably distributes value and aligns participants to common goals, something between libertarianism and socialism with regard to human rights, but also the prosperity of entrepreneurs. A Penguin Party, right? A political philosophy of code as law. So as we move towards this construction of this DAO that I've been working on for a while, I kind of do so with these basic ideals that I sort of hope, like dreams that I hope come true. And the first one is basically a basic income for everybody on the planet, right? There's no need for everybody to be struggling to survive really at this point in the 21st century if we manage the planet and its resources really well. And so we want to put crypto in the hands of every person on the planet. We want to onboard the next billion users into the Ethereum ecosystem. We want to incentivize them to invest their funds, to develop on this blockchain, and to participate in governance these protocols. And by doing so, we can create jobs in a new Web 3.0 economy. We want products as tokens. So we want every commodity on the planet to become wrapped, tokenized, and placed into liquidity pools with governance protocols to control distribution and production. So basically, I was inspired by this idea of Uniswap and MTurk, Mechanical Turk, which researchers are probably familiar with. Kickstarter, all these kind of things prove to me that there's a power to crowdsourcing, right? There's a power to, and Uniswap is a great example of these tokens that represent the physical item, right? And so I think that the coronavirus has kind of shown us that we need a new normal in the way that we produce and consume goods. Everybody's probably aware of some of the resource shortages and product shortages going on right now. I'm sort of the opinion that we want all goods to become public goods, where they're crowdsourced and controlled by the public and for the benefit of the public, while still allowing entrepreneurs, right, and innovators to innovate. And I think lastly, my ideal is quadratic decision making. So every economic function on the planet really should become governable, right? And stocks are kind of similar to this, where you have different proposals that come up and people vote on them and that sort of thing. I would like to see it become more like blockchain, right? Where everything has a governance token and consumers of products get a lot more say in the products they consume. So they can vote on what products they want next year's model car to be like, or things like that, you know, is kind of how I envision the future. And I think it really that embodies this ideal that people are more important than wealth with quadratic decision making. You know, power should be more equitably distributed. Quadratic decision making is an innovation that prevents governance protocols from being strictly plutocratic, where it's just, you know, rich people running everything. We don't want that. We want something that's more equalized, right? And so I think quadratic decision making is where we get that.
You know, and I think you're bringing up a lot of really compelling arguments. I mean, both economically and just more on an existential ideological end, right? I mean, this is a very holistic approach to how how can the civilization in general really adopt or I guess be enveloped in this fourth industrial revolution that's coming, right? Because basically it embodies three things, right? It embodies open community, right? Trustlessness and permissionless infrastructures, right? And I think that's exactly what you're trying to execute here with Penguin Party. Interesting enough, I kind of want you to, and I'm sure you will, I want you to kind of dive into the basic income aspect of it, because the moment, you know, the moment you bring that up, immediately from the top of my head is a lot of economic concepts get brought about, like MMT that's going on, right? Universal basic income, things of that nature. So I'm assuming that you incorporated this with those theories in mind, but with your own alteration as well. So kind of curious to see how you're going to go about that. How does Penguin Party approach that in its own unique way? And ultimately, how does it serve as a public good? How does it benefit the community at large, for those who participate and those who don't participate, right? How do you engage those individuals that aren't aware of this? I don't want to call it a product, but more of a movement. That's what it seems like you're trying to kind of cultivate here, is a movement to improve just people's daily lifestyle. You know,
And make blockchain relate to people's real lives.
Exactly. Of course, all in the name of blockchain, right? So that's fantastic. So yeah, if you could just touch on that a bit, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. So I've been kind of trialing an idea for a token, which is not fish, that would basically be like a credit. And it would kind of operate similarly to MakerDAO, where it has some utility aspect that you are able to mint credits against, you know, kind of some of our current tokens, such as Fish. Fish is kind of the main governance token of Penguin Party, for those of you that aren't familiar. I touch on that a little bit later. but basically I want to experiment with that. And I have a kind of upcoming experiment with that I may be putting out a pretty small batch of subjects to see and study what the effect on liquidity pools is and how people really use the money and how it affects their lives. I think there's a more important scientific question. Is this actually going to improve the economy or the way that people's lives work? I think the answer is yes, but that's just hypothetical until you do some kind of experimental research to prove it. And so I'm definitely pretty interested in exactly that, researching just a little bit about whether this has like a really bad price impact on the token or whether people will uptake it and kind of give it value or ascribe it value. I think it's a really interesting thing to experiment with, and regardless of how it turns out, you get good data. So I think firstly, before I get any further, I'm just going to give everybody the links right here. I'm not sure how well you can see it. Can you see it okay?
It looks perfect on my end.
Cool. Yeah, so penguinparty.eth.link is our main homepage where you can find some info about what crazy penguins are doing. There's Penguinalytics, which is kind of our V2 Uniswap info fork. Penguinswap, which is our open source interface for Uniswap. And then we have our Twitter down here. So Penguin Party is a Meta governance DAO that participates as a governance delegate on protocols such as Compound and Uniswap. We operate Penguinswap, which is our open source community run interface for Uniswap. And Penguinalytics, which I just touched on that, is kind of our fork of uniswap.info. Penguin Party was originally created with the mission of returning value to the uni holders who delegate to it. It stays true to that value to this day. We're really Uniswap focused. I know you and me were just in the Uniswap community call a few minutes ago. And with our Uniswap grant request, we received funding to further develop our in-app analytics. So like charting and graphs directly in the app, automatic arbitrage, which is probably the most interesting thing that has come out of our laboratory. Basically, you can swap a token for more of itself through triangle trades. So it looks for arbitrage opportunities automatically, and it will show them to you. And they're not always great. Sometimes it is profitable, though. I've seen a few users come in and make a profitable roulette, which is what we call it. Manual pathing, and the last thing on our grant roadmap is a network topology visualization. So basically like a map of the Uniswap liquidity pools is kind of one of the higher level goals that I would like to get done as part of the grant.
So quick question before we kind of go to the next slide. Can you briefly elaborate a little bit more on the automatic arbitrage? Well, what exactly does that entail, and how does one, I guess, oh, there we go. Awesome.
Yep. So they humorously titled this slide, "You start with 1,000 fish and end with one more." Basically, the concept is really highlighted perfectly here, that you swap 1,000 fish for 860 token X's. 860 token X's is 590 token Ys. 590 token Ys is 1,001 fish. So you kind of went through this route and came back with more than you started with. And they attached a screenshot over on the right-hand side of somebody swapping. Tori is one of our stable coins, or is a stable coin. So they're swapping $10 for $11 here. And you can see the route at the bottom. It goes Tori, fish, crab, ETH, Tori. It's pretty neat. We were talking in Penguin Party one day, and somebody was like, well, couldn't you swap back to the same token? And I was like, I guess let's try. And that's kind of how that was born. We're kind of an accidental, full of accidental experiments that just turn out pretty great. And I think that was one of them. So what do we currently do? Oh, I lost it. Oh, hold on. Let me pull up my presentation again. There we go. So what do we currently do? We develop open source software and public goods to improve the world. We want to ensure the composability of protocols we operate in and meta-govern for the best interest of the little guy. I grew up pretty poor, so that really relates to me. I want this to like work for the regular Joe, the average person. So we've kind of got a couple of things here. I've already covered Penguin Swap and Penguinalytics, but we have another product that's in active development. And this is really highlights like the public good aspect of what we want to do. So we're working on an ENS gateway as an alternative to Cloudflare's .eth.link ENS gateway. For the technically minded among you, basically Ethereum name service has a really cool aspect to it that you can attach an IPFS hash to a domain name like hitterunk.eth, or penguinparty.eth. And so you can go to penguinparty.eth.link, it'll resolve straight to that IPFS hash. Of course, the downside that we discovered is that Cloudflare doesn't really have great infrastructure in place for it right now. And so a lot of times it'll fail to resolve or things like that. And it's a super cool next gen tech. So we wanted to operate our own ENS gateway. So we've been working on that for the last couple months. It's coming out pretty soon. It's called .eth.limo, which we thought was a pretty nice name. But basically it'll be a free to use alternative to Cloudflare's solution.
So how can, I guess two questions, how can we claim a name, right? Similar to, will it be a .eth or will it be like a .penguin? What exactly will it encompass? And at the same time, what data infrastructure would you be implementing? Like, since I'm assuming you're trying to decentralize it a little bit more, so would you incorporate like, I don't know, Arweave or some of these more decentralized data management infrastructures? What's the...
So super cool question. It uses your regular ENS name, and it's just an alternative gateway. So the current .eth websites that you know and love, that you go to .eth.link, you just go to .eth.limo instead, and it'll resolve it. So it's kind of like an alternate DNS server. It's really similar to that. It just provides name resolution. And it's super cool for that as long as it works. And, so the reason I got started on that mission is people try to come to penguinswap.eth.link all the time. Once I got talking to the ENS guys, they were like, well, if you're having trouble with it, you could just run your own. And so I've been on that mission for a while. It runs on a Kubernetes cluster. As well, we're kind of working with cloud providers to spin up nodes regionally around the world, wherever users request data, and we want to cache that data interregionally. So it definitely has a lot to it. There's a lot more than I expected in that project, but it's been really fulfilling. It's definitely something we're trying to do as a public good, to make the world a better place and make it less reliant on giant corporations like Cloudflare, or at some point we want to host an RPC endpoint so that we don't always have to depend on Infura, right? It's kind of the same thing. And so the last thing on here is the Castle DAO. Basically, it's an open source DAO deployment and governance token standard. So other people will be able to use the same contracts. It's all open source. And I think people will find that it's a cool primitive. And so I've created a couple of these primitives throughout my time leading Penguin Swap. I'm going to see if I can find a slide with that. Yep, here we go. So we have a few different tokens. We have Fish, which is our main token. It's basically represents the voting power within the party, and it's used in kind of a bunch of different liquidity pools. We have like 4 pages of liquidity pools. So Fish is kind of the main routing token in our ecosystem. We have Tori, which is a wrapped ADI. Basically, all of the ADI inside of the contract is interest redirected to the Penguin Party wallet. So it's basically a stable coin that people can hold to donate the financial power of the interest, right, to Penguin Party. Crab is basically wrapped delegated comp tokens. So when somebody deposits their comp tokens, they get back Crab. And similarly, you can burn the Crab to get back your comp tokens. It's 1-to-1, fully backed. And basically the idea is that you can use your voting power by delegating it to us and liquidity pool it at the same time, which is kind of impossible to do with just comp alone. So it's kind of a neat way to support us. Shrimp is similar for Uni, and it's a pretty open contract too. Anybody can make their own shrimp. And I've kind of been waiting for a while for another governance party to pop up and be like, yeah, we have our own shrimp. Then as well, we have Castle, which is basically the upcoming version of fish. It's going to be wrapped fish. You'll deposit your fish, you'll get Castle. It'll work really similar to the sushi bar. So basically we can buy back fish with Penguin Swap fees and then send that to the Castle DAO so that all the stakers kind of receive them pro rata.
That's pretty cool. It's basically like a self-sustaining ecosystem in a way. Like this is really, really cool.
That's definitely the idea, yeah. And it's just meant to really follow this formula of returning value to the holders. In this case, it's kind of grown a little bit since, just being uni holders. Now it's kind of like the fish holders. We want to return value to them. We want to incentivize the decentralization of protocols, and then we want to fund the protocol development. So I was kind of one of the first guys in Uniswap, really pushing that we needed things like the Uniswap grant program and things like that. I really considered it that if there's anything we were going to spend the treasury on, improvements and integrations to Uniswap are what make the most sense. And so I was a big pusher for that early on, especially during kind of the original Dharma trying to airdrop Uni proposal, which is sort of how we got here. Kind of before I go into this next part, because it's kind of lengthy write-up, which kind of highlights like the whole story of how we got to be where we are. Is there anything you want to ask me in particular?
Honestly, I'm enjoying this as we go. Like I'm learning a lot. I'm sure our viewers will learn a lot as well. I mean, you kind of set the bar on wanting to know the origin story of Penguin Party. So I guess I'm gonna table my questions for now, and
Okay.
I want to learn what happened that birthed Penguin Party. How do these penguins come?
Yeah, it was definitely unexpected, and I think that was kind of the strangest part of the whole thing, was that I really did not ever intend to be at the helm of kind of like a multi-million-dollar startup. Like that didn't really occur to me when I started on this journey. So once upon a time, right, there was a Uniswap airdrop. I think a lot of people remember that. It was a pretty legendary event. And it did a really amazing thing. It redistributed wealth and it changed the lives of everyone who had ever used Uniswap v1. Some people bought new PS5s, some bought new GPUs, some saved their uni, but everybody was touched by the magic of the unicorn, right? And people gathered together from all over the world into the Uniswap Discord. It was a total mess. And they were all celebrating, right, that they got this 400 uni. For basically everybody involved in receiving that airdrop, it was a fair amount of money. So I received this airdrop at kind of a really convenient time in my life, like when I really needed it. And when I was working at a call center, little $10 an hour job, regular Joe. I was working for, I believe it was Experian, for the credit bureau. And I just answered phones all day. It was an okay job. But I'd been buying ETH since early 2018. I had been mining it since the ICO. And I've been in Bitcoin since 2012. So I've been in this space for a long time. And I really saw that Ethereum, when it launched, had this like promise of kind of exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of. This is something that can really change the world. So I taught myself Solidity in 2017. I worked on some pet projects, but I never really had time to do what I wanted to do, right? I was working 40, 50 hours a week. I never really had time to just focus on web development full time after I got out of school. So it was near the time of the airdrop when the first lockdowns for the coronavirus started, which kind of made me lose my job. I basically became laid off like out of nowhere. Nobody was expecting it. I was living off of my savings. I was kind of wondering, like, how am I going to fit into this new normal, and you heard it all over the news constantly. Like, we're in a new normal. And, I was kind of scared. I think everybody was kind of scared when the coronavirus first started. I didn't really know what I was going to do. And lo and behold, the Uniswap airdrop landed on me. I'm unemployed. I'm sitting here in my house. My wife left. She took my kid. Everything was pretty bad until I got this Uniswap airdrop, right? And flipped my whole life around. I was very interested in DeFi, but I never really was actively involved. From time to time, I'd pop into the compound.finance Discord, and I'd bother Robert Leshner with questions about implementation and things like that, who turned out to be a huge inspiration to me, by the way. I really want to thank Mr. Leshner. I think I learned a lot about how to talk to the public running a startup from him, kind of watching him. And silently, I began making some small investments and I learned Solidity. It wasn't until the Uniswap airdrops in the lockdowns that I really decided I wanted to make a move in Ethereum. And so when Uni launched, I joined into the Discord. I got as involved as I could. And a guy in there named Bora, he runs community calls now. He kind of pretty quickly honed in on me. And I got a very nice friend of Uniswap, Yellow Glow. I was answering lots of people's questions. I was really active in there. I didn't have much else to do. And finally, I decided I would run as a protocol politician, and I would kind of oppose the Dharma airdrop, and that went pretty well. So when governance began, I decided to throw in my hat. I gave my opinion. I was absolutely astounded by the results. Before I knew it, I had amassed over 1 million Union votes. It was at that moment I realized something important, that we needed a way to decentralize delegates. And that's when Penguin Party was born. We embarked on a mission to change the world. I created a simple multi-sig through Gnosis to delegate the votes to instead. I found some like minds to join me on the multi-sig to try and pioneer this new idea in governance, that we could have something more akin to a political party instead of an individual entrusted with these votes. And things took off from there. Basically, I created Fish right after that to signal some of the votes in Penguin Party, and I set up a snapshot.page so that they could use it to vote. And I was pretty as well blown away that the Fish acquired a lot of value pretty quickly, more than I expected. It was a valueless governance token that I just airdropped on all my voters. So it wasn't something I ever expected to have really like a financial value. It was very experimental, Not long after creating the Fish, a group of some pretty magical developers came into the Uniswap Discord, and they told us they had a problem. They're one of our partners now, Ethos, kind of probably more well known as DeFi Hub. They had something they called the Unimergency, which was basically the discovery of a problem in the Uniswap routing. Basically, it worked along these lines. They had liquidity pools for ERC20 to ERC20 tokens. They were not listed on the preferred routing list for the Uniswap interface. And because of that, users weren't able to be routed through those liquidity pools, even if it was a better trade. So there was a lot of debate in the Uniswap Discord about it. I sort of realized in this split second, I could fork Uniswap's interface, simply add BIDL, which is kind of their main token, to the preferred routing list, and this would fix the problem for our customer. So I worked in customer service for a long time. I have that sort of thinking that they're a customer of Uniswap. We want to make our product work for them. So I just added them as a preferred route, and I created Penguin Swap. And so I basically just spent one night banging my head against React Native, learning the Uniswap code base, and I pumped Penguin Swap right out. It was pretty exciting. After the birth of Penguin Swap, we just continued to explode. I mean, it was incredible. I was suddenly filled with idea after idea. We implemented consistently in like completely unexpected ways. I remember my earliest co-founder, I remember him telling me that Penguin Swap didn't make any sense. It didn't make sense. We're just a governance party. Why would we create our own interface, right? And I had all these arguments with him. He just didn't really get it, And I think that that's kind of been what we've been best at is going in a completely unexpected direction from time to time, like Penguin Swap or creating Tori or Shrimp, or each one of those things just kind of came along naturally, if you get what I mean. So over the next
to kind of ping in real quick, if you don't mind me interjecting. I mean, the way, and I'm really loving the story, by the way. This is awesome. But the way that it's going about so far is every obstacle that has been experienced, whether via you or your team, you guys just built it out yourselves, right? Basically, with this routing, you ran into this Unimergency issue, and you and your team reflect and say, "Hey, we could definitely mitigate this ourselves. Let's build it out." And then I'm sure, surely enough, I'm sure somehow, some way down the storyline that Tori is going to come up and Shrimp is going to come up because you guys basically figured it out, or to some extent figured it out as a bandage, if you would, you know. And then I guess this hones in on this self-fulfilling, self-sustaining ecosystem that you kind of built out here. So just wanted to interject with that. I think this is awesome so far. So please.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it though, that, you know, it, for me, I was trying to fix something for Uniswap. I wasn't ever trying to like go off and create like Sushi Swap, or, you know, I'm very loyal and I think I've stuck with Uniswap like really strongly. And the idea was just to fix, you know, originally fix something for one of our customers. And it kind of evolved into just me constantly running Penguin Swap and Penguin Party. And so, yeah, I think it was shortly after that that we developed Shrimp. We developed Tori kind of right after that. We developed Crab as we decided we wanted to expand into different protocols. And some of it is just accidental. For example, you know, knowing that Shrimp's contract basically works the same as the Crab contract because it's basically the same kind of token. Comp and Uni have all the same methods and, you know, functions. So it was pretty easy to just stick right in there. And yeah, it's kind of been like a laboratory for a lot of different experiments, and for the community to come in and say, hey, we want this, and we just build it. And I think one of my pet peeves throughout the whole project has been being asked where the white paper is. A lot of people ask me like, hey, where's a white paper or something that really explains what's going on? And I'm like, there's not one. We just build stuff, you know? And so we have built a lot of things just kind of experimentally, and it's all gone pretty well. I think one of the most important things that we contributed was the support for the Uniswap grants program. I think that has been extremely successful. There's been millions of dollars funding that different projects have received. As well, the DeFi Defense Fund, I think, is going to be a big success. I think right now the community, you know, needs a little time to uptake it. But I'm definitely proud to see how far the Uniswap's come. And I definitely believe it's going to change the world. I think Ethereum is going to change the world. So I'm super passionate about it. And definitely they've changed my life. I grew up like really poor, and for once I really feel like I'm standing on top of the world, and like I'm doing something that really matters in a way that it never did before. Our team now, it has like 10 people. We've expanded a lot. We're working on a whole bunch of different projects, from the Castle DAO to the ENS gateway. And we want to provide alternatives to things like Infura and Cloudflare, and those sort of things. And definitely none of this would have ever been achievable without people that voted for me and supported me kind of along the way. I think that there was, that's the most amazing part of what has happened in this story, was that the community just really came together, and, you know, they voted us in with like 1 million uni. We defeated the original Dharma proposals. We supported and helped pass the UGP. And of course, our voting power went down, you know, as the drama decreased, and we focused more on developing our own kind of products and ecosystem. You know, I think we're sitting in like 4,000 or 5,000 uni right now. It's pretty modest. But I think that now is like really great for people to jump in and get into our Discord, those sort of things, and participate with us. You know, everything we do is open source. We want people to take things from it and build their own products or contribute back or whatever they want to do. It's the beauty of open source. And I definitely strive to return value to the holders of Uni. I've been as proactive as I can be in that regard for sure. So many wonderful projects have gotten funded out of the grants program, like with Tally, which is a governance dashboard, proposal creation dApps like fish.vote, which I thought was really cool. And with the DeFi Defense Fund, I think we've got a real chance to educate policymakers, and the general public, establish favorable regulations for ourselves. And I really encourage everybody not just to get involved with Penguin Party, but to be active in the Uniswap governance. Uniswap is really critical DeFi infrastructure. There's so much money that moves through it. There's so much power for token creators to come out and list a token. Anybody can create a token and list it on Uniswap, and that's really what's so empowering about it. It's a very free place. Did you guys have any questions at all?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot. I guess let's. A good question is previously the DeFi Education Fund proposal, right? Let's touch on that because within the Meta-Delegate community, that was something that we really deliberated on for quite some time. As you well know, the community is very split on what's going on at the moment. Maybe I'll give you the floor to kind of speak your opinion on the matter. How it's being organized or coordinated on the DeFi Education Fund, and in terms of how these funds are being allocated or dispersed. I know that really got a lot of the community riled up the last couple of days. So yeah, just basically just opine on that a little bit and just give us your perspective on what's going on.
Yeah, and I will definitely preface this by saying that I have no association with A16Z or any kind of venture capital, or anything like that. None. So this is just Hiderunk speaking from Penguin Party. I'm a very regular guy. I'll tell you that I absolutely supported the DeFi Defense Fund on the basis that I think that it's something we need. We need regulatory clarity in our ecosystem really badly. As a guy that's created tokens in America, I can tell you the lawyers to help figure out are not cheap, and they are kind of rare right now. It's a very specialized industry. I've certainly had to deal with quite a few lawyers since I embarked on this journey, and ask them questions. And even some of these lawyers are like, that's a pretty gray area. We're not sure. So we need to be sure. We need legal clarity really badly. In terms of the drama, I think that's going on. I'm a politician, so I'll address the drama a little bit. The main drama is basically that the DeFi Defense Fund, after receiving this pretty large amount of Uni, sold a large amount of the Uni. I would say that it goes without saying that that's what they were going to do. They needed cash to be able to pay lawyers and to pay for designers, website, just like Larry Suckernick said. It makes a lot of sense. I think that maybe we could have a little bit more, kind of like you were saying earlier, we could have something that is a little bit more like, this is how the funds will be used on this time schedule. Or maybe I think one of the ideas I heard would be like a time lock that only allowed a certain amount of it to be withdrawn at a time. I think all of those things are things the community should definitely have deliberated about before the proposal was approved. And it's definitely why delegating the Uni to someone you trust is important. And if you use Uniswap or you depend on it, having some Uni to have a say there is, I think, important. Throughout the ecosystem for different people that are building projects that integrate, liquidity poolers, maybe even people that just casually swap. That's why it was airdropped on us. And I think a lot of those people really didn't keep the Uni. And so, I think it's hard to differentiate, especially on Twitter too, who has the Uni to back their voice. And I think this is a clear case where the proposal was totally approved and not a lot of people opposed it really before it passed. So it afterwards is kind of the wrong time to start asking the questions. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what and you were on the call as well. That's what I kind of tried to touch on during the community call is, you know, in theory, the proposal was sound, right? And I completely agree with you. We need to educate our legislative bodies, right? There needs to be some regulatory oversight to help regulators understand what's going on. Basically, for instance, I stated this in the community call earlier is, you know, a lot of these regulators, they don't even understand what a smart contract is. So if they don't even understand what a smart contract is, what do you think is going to happen when we talk about DeFi, right? This nascent space that nobody really understands yet, right? It's changing on an hour-to-hour basis, basically. So I completely understand and agree with almost everything that you're saying. And there should have been longer deliberations in place in terms of attestations, allocation plans, all this, but in turn, it actually happened after the fact, which it counteracts what's going on, right? It's that defeats the purpose of having an open forum, right? We should be doing this during the active process as opposed to afterwards. But you know, hindsight's 2020. So
Yeah, and I think that's more my point is that like hindsight is 2020. I think that the number one way to address the trauma is to basically just say that like when this uni was allocated out of the treasury, we should have had the expectation that they would sell it. There was no limitation placed on their ability to sell it. So I don't really see any reason to be angry about that. It doesn't make any sense to me from my political perspective. I think the proposal was super duper sound, kind of like you were saying.
No, that's a fair statement. Yeah.
I think, and I've got some miscellaneous slides here at the end, but I mostly ran through my slides. This is something I humorously kind of refer to as the fish cycle, and I think I've lost it. Hold on, let me go back. There we go. Basically, by governing the treasury, holders of Castle, when it finishes rolling out, will be able to use fish to fund internal projects and make strategic investments in other projects, that sort of thing, right? It's a DAO. They can manage the treasury to kind of do what they want to do. I basically call it the fish cycle, kind of like you were saying, like it's an environmental process where basically the DAO is, and this is how Uni works too, and that's why I bring this up. You could imagine fish is Uni, right? Fish are used to reward participants in the ecosystem, which kind of goes over to those participants expend those fish, or they pool them, or they, in the future, wrap them in the castle. And then with product revenues, right, those fish get bought back and we refill the treasury. And so it's a cycle, right? I think that that's kind of the component of Uniswap maybe that is missing a little bit is returning the value to the holders. I really think that we need to turn on the fee switch on Uniswap. And when we do that, we can use some of the fees to buy back Uni. And I think those Moon Boys will be much happier when that process starts happening, and it starts happening, in a more automatic, trustless way than like these very human kind of committees that we have right now that are doing different things like the UGP program, or as we were just talking about, the DeFi Defense Fund. I definitely think that this is kind of the key to a successful ecosystem is for the funds to flow back around. So the treasury isn't filling up right now, it's just emptying, right? And I think that that's what these guys are seeing. And I think the easiest way to fix that is just to turn the fee switch on, maybe even onto V2 instead of just V3.
And then that was kind of a conversation that I've seen happening on the forum is test out the fee switch on V2, right? Because there's still a pretty substantial amount of liquidity on V2. And then I think the overarching question that a lot of people are asking is, okay, let's turn on the fee switch, but now what happens with those funds? What happens with those funds once they hit the treasury? And that begets another question is, should the community diversify the treasury to other funds, right, to other assets? And then how does that transition into V3 at a later effect? So it's a fairly interesting conversation that's going on that I've seen going on in the forum.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting is that at first, when this fee switch gets turned on V2, we'll accrue basically every token, every liquidity pool there is on Uniswap V2 into the treasury. And that's a lot of different exposure to a lot of different tokens. I don't think we're going to want all of those tokens. So I think at some point, people will probably figure out which coins, you know, in the list are worth keeping in the treasury, which LPs are worth keeping in the treasury. And I think some of them will probably be flagged for like buyback contracts, where those fees are just sent to a buyback contract and it swaps the fees into Uni. That's what makes the most sense to me, is if a lot of those things get swapped into Uni and we try and stack that in the treasury. Maybe not all of it, right? I think having some exposure to things like Chainlink or comp tokens in the Uni treasury or things like that is definitely really interesting. And it puts Uniswap at center.
No, absolutely. And then I guess the longer standing question is, then what? You know, like kind of simply put, is then if this diversification plan were to play out the way that it's intended to, right? With the community driving this initiative, what happens? Like, well, what else is there in store for Uniswap? For instance, not too long ago, I remember Vitalik posting something along the lines of making Uni the Oracle, an Oracle token, right? Which is a fairly interesting proposition in itself, right? Proposal in itself. And I think diversifying the treasury will kind of proliferate more of those conversations to come about. Is, okay, what other utility, what other use case can we involve Uni with, right? Because now you're kind of I guess bifurcating the use case of what you could do with this token, right? As of right now, you can only use it as an LP, as a governance token. That's basically it, at least off the top of my head. You know, please correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, it's a fairly interesting argument to have, especially right now as Uniswap continues to scale.
Yeah, well, and I think that like the example of like the shrimp was definitely created because like I realized you couldn't delegate and be in the liquidity pool at the same time. So like it's sort of like you choose to have it in the liquidity pool and then you lose your political power, or you keep the political power but you're not really earning any return on it. And so I think that there's kind of a variety of cool things like the shrimp contract that could be done to make things like even better for, you know, the people participating in the system, and potentially some kind of way to incentivize participation in the governance votes, I think is really necessary. And I'm not sure what that looks like if it's delegation farming, or which is an idea that I've played around with a little bit, or something similar. I think delegation farming would be interesting, you know, if people delegated their Uni and then they kind of, it was like staking and they, you know, received some amount of Uni back. Of course, I think right now everybody's looking at the price action of Uni, and so until something is sort of in place to do buybacks, I think that a lot of these proposals to expend Uni are going to be unpopular, you know, until something's done to return value.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up governance mining, because that's something I've been kind of toying with myself. And I think an interesting approach would be, it's similar to what you're mentioning with delegation mining, right? But the only tweak that I'll add is, say there is a proposal. Let's assume the DeFi education fund was active again, right? Those who voted in favor, which ultimately did win, right? It did get executed. Those who voted will be rewarded X amount or pro rata of however much they delegated, right? But that's only if the proposal won, right? Those who were on the losing side, or the opposition, they won't receive the reward, right? And vice versa, right? If it were to get declined, then those who voted on the other side of the aisle will receive this delegated reward, however much they may be, pro rata. But I guess the interesting twist is the implementation of kind of like what Ampleforth Protocol has with their Geyser program, is the reward multiplier, right? The longer you have staked in this delegate, you know, the higher the multiplier is. but it's always contingent on the outcome of a particular proposal, right? So
I
I think,
really like that.
yeah. So I think that kind of balances out that how do I say, that levels the playing field, because now it mitigates any whale accumulation, right? Because now anybody could go accumulate in the open market, right? But now actively participating and locking those tokens, right? It not only improves TVL to an extent, but it also significantly improves engagement and participation in governance processes, right, or practices. So I think that's something that hasn't been really discussed or talked about too
No,
much.
and I really like the idea of the multiplier where, that way they're not going to be switching their votes to the winning side, or you're trying to, like, ahead of the proposal being proposed. Which is one of the interesting things actually about the way the voting works, is that it's snapshotted at a particular time. I remember when governance launched, people were awful confused about that, like whether or not you could buy votes afterwards, like increase your vote. And I'm like, no, it doesn't really work that way. I like the idea of delegation farming, though. I think that delegation incentives are really needed in some kind of way to incentivize the decentralization of Uniswap. And I think that's one of the complaints people had about the DeFi Defense Fund proposal the last day or two, is just that the participation rates in governance are still kind of low. And I definitely think that there's something that could be done to boost it up, and get more regular people participating. Sometimes it's drama that does that,
Yeah.
sometimes that's what they want.
Well, and to the end, to kind of wrap up that whole proposal, that this whole governance mining idea is, there should really be a cap, right? For instance, I think like the top 5 uni delegates, right? They control well over, I think, 10 million uni, right? Or 10 million uni of voting power, I should say, which take about, I think, 1% of the entire weighting of voting, right? So that should be the cap or the threshold, right? Once a delegate is about to surpass 1%, or maybe even less than 10 million, I'm just speaking arbitrarily here now, like it should cut off. They should no longer be able to receive any delegation votes, because now it again, it gives more of a level participation process on who could receive delegation votes. Are those votes locked? And it minimizes the emergence of any whales, right? For like, I guess, like Harvard, or again, the top 5 delegates that are in, that are delegates, right? So I think that's an interesting concept that should be tweaked out a bit. But yeah, that you see what's going on. So
yeah. Well, and I completely agree with you that I think that there's a couple of things for us to hone in on and try and perfect. I think quadratic decision making really relates to that. Like Vitalik wrote a really awesome paper about quadratic decision making, and that's what convinced me. And if you guys Google it, Vitalik Buterin quadratic, it'll pop right up. And it was really interesting. I think Vitalik is a crazy genius. I think that he is really smart in what he kind of put in there about like making things more equitable is important. I think that's what it really functionally does, is it makes things a lot more equitable. Looks like we're coming in here on the last couple minutes. I think I'll touch a little bit on our UGP grant deliverables. So right now we're working on analytics directly in the app, which kind of got sidetracked a little bit by the V3 release and us integrating V3. There's still not great documentation. It's getting better. The documentation's gotten a lot better the last couple weeks, but we're working on analytics directly in the app. I wish I had a screenshot in here. Basically charts directly in the swap modal. We're trying to get a lot more info into the swap modal so that you really know what's going on with your trades. We want APY estimations shown in the pool page on Penguin Swap, fee earnings shown in the pool page. Really, we want you to not have to leave the app at all. You can just do all the things you need to do right there. We've gotten automatic arbitrage done, which I was showing you earlier what that looks like. If you go to penguinswap.eth.link and you try to swap like USD coin for USD coin or fish to fish, you can see that sweet thing in action yourself. And kind of the last two things that we were touching on earlier is manual pathing. So I want to add a lot more route selection and configuration to Uniswap. And the kind of final thing that will get done as part of the UGP grant is like a network topology. So you can imagine that like a map of Uniswap. And so I'm going to pull something up here real quick just to kind of highlight exactly what it is that I'm talking about. Yep, force layout with images. So this is basically what I want the Uniswap liquidity pools to look like. Basically a really simple network graph, probably written in D3 using the same library. Basically, it has this great functionality that you can kind of click on each one of these things, pop open a deal about them, and that sort of thing. And I sort of think that we could have something similar for liquidity pools with dynamically sized elements that tell you how much liquidity or volume those pools or tokens are doing. Something to make it real visual instead of these kind of like lists of different pools. And it's very hard to navigate uniswap.info and get the info you really want. I don't think there's a whole lot more here. There's the ETH.limo kind of entering testing. We talked about that pretty well. So these are our partners here. Easteroids is a DeFi search engine that wants to use our ENS gateway. Tectix is helping us out with charting. EthOS is kind of who we originally made PenguinSwap to help their problem. And Saren Protocol, they make some pretty cool community tools and they're one of our partners. So I figured I would run through the last couple slides there. I really appreciated the chance to jump on with the Ben Meta-Delegate and talk about the crazy penguins and tell the story a little bit more than the last time I got to speak.
No, absolutely. No, it's really been awesome to jam with you. And I guess we could all say we should be considered penguins now. So that was pretty cool. I guess the last question to wrap things up is how can students get more involved with Penguin Party? What opportunities are there for students to kind of get more familiar with the community? I know that Penguin Party is one of the servers in Discord, so I'm assuming that's one of the ways they can do it, but I want them to hear it from the horse's mouth. I'm a student. What can I do to kind of become a penguin and be a part of the community?
Yeah, the easiest places to find us are in the Uniswap Discord, or you can go to penguinparty.eth.link and you can find our Discord in there. You can jump right in and I'm in there every day. So you can @ me, you can show me your ideas. If you're interested in front-end web development or back-end, art, almost anything really, we can find a place for you in our little community. And of course, there's kind of a fair amount of money to go around in regards to that. Maybe somebody, it's kind of Google-ish if anybody has cool pet projects or things like that. Usually I can make some grants or investments into those sort of things. And I'm definitely always kind of hiring front-end people if you have React Native skills, those sort of things. But we welcome everybody with all kinds of ideas. And we definitely are interested in the community telling us what it is that they want us to build.
Fantastic. Well, with that said, we're about a minute over time. So that being said, Dave, really appreciate your time, man. Penguin Party, everybody's now a penguin. We're going to start scheduling our next UGP showcase coming up in the next couple of weeks. So everybody stay tuned to the Ben Twitter to see what's to be announced. Well, those who watch, thanks for coming on, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.